So for those of you who are just listening, and Carrie, who I don't think could see the video, I don't know why. Sorry about that, Carrie. The scene that you're watching was this guy who was stuck in a Khmer Rouge work camp, basically, and he was fluent in French, fluent in English. He's Cambodian though, and so he needed to hide this because if they discovered, and they would, like, people would test him, right? They would speak French to him to see if he would respond, right? Yeah, he needed to hide that because if they found out that he was educated, they would kill him. And there were moments where they would have people stand up. They would say, "Oh, Ankar, which is the party, the Ankar would like to. We're going to extend an olive branch. Basically, this is a time to forgive. If you were a doctor or a professor, come and receive the blessing and forgiveness." And they would get a hug, and then they would go away, and they would be shot. They would be killed later. Because they were trying to get rid of the intellectual class. And one of the things that happens in this scene is he's talking in his head to his friend, New York Times reporter, who's back in the States at this point, and he's talking about how the Khmer Rouge has painted the enemy as something that's within. It's like virus, basically. It's a disease, and that disease is. It's a memory disease. It's thinking too much about the past, right? And remember, they set up, I think 1975 was year zero, right? This was year zero. This was destroying all the past, year zero. And if you didn't see it, if you're just listening, there's a scene in which a little kid, they're teaching kids, and the kid walks up to a chalkboard, which has got a picture of a family on it, and puts an X through the family, and then takes his finger and wipes the connection between the mom and the little kid. They're holding hands. He wipes the connection between them, and everyone claps, and they're told that you need, you can only have love for the party and for Anka. And the reason I wanted to play this is because, well, two reasons. One, notice the intentional destruction of the family, and this is super important. And it's, we noticed this, Carrie, when we read Brave New World, which I think a lot of people forget, right? A lot of people forget that Brave New World is just as prescient as 1984. They need to control every aspect of childhood development, and part of that is destroying the family, because the family can teach you values that are contrary to the state's values or the group values. The family can give you a sense of self and independence that inoculates you against indoctrination, and so they need to totally destroy that. And the other reason for destroying the past, and again, it's fascinating to me. What the poignant thing here is, they referred to this thinking too much about the past as this disease, and the disease is within us, and we have to eradicate it. Mm-hmm. And it just reminded me of this. Got to pull down the statues. There's this disease. We can't have the past. Blah blah blah. And I wanna just point out something about evil generally. I'm not talking about evil people. I'm talking about evil as ideological evil. Evil relies on ignorance and fear. Those are two things. I mean, Socrates, the ancient philosopher Socrates, actually believed that your righteousness was directly related to knowledge. He thought knowledge was the key to virtue, right? If you needed to be virtuous, you just need to be more educated. Now, I don't agree with him on that, but he did recognize that I think what he was recognizing was that evil certainly often requires ignorance. Right? Evil certainly flourishes in ignorance. And if you think about what erasing the past does, just from a practical standpoint, it does a few things. One, they are literally pushing an ideology that was responsible for over 100 million deaths last century. This democide, governments, not deaths in wars, governments killing their own civilians, right? A couple million of those, by the way, happened in the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia in the span of 4 years. And in order to accept this ideology and go preach it, I think two things are really helpful. One is you don't know anything about the past. And two is you're unable to think through the consequences of ideas. So critical thinking is inimical to spread of this ideology, and knowledge is also toxic to the spread of the ideology. So this year zero is the idea of encouraging of discouraging critical thought, encouraging ignorance, discouraging critical thought. And I just want to point something out. That is the goal. I know that I think a lot of people are naive when they look at this and someone says, hey, the goal of those professors that you're sending your kids to be lectured by in school, they're literally trying to destroy their ability to reason and they're trying to make them ignorant. That sounds hyperbolic, and it sounds like I think you're naively dismissing that as like, well, you don't understand. That couldn't possibly be their goal. That's too evil of a goal. That is their goal. Listen to what they say and do. That is their goal. And I think it's important that we don't evade the fact that that's what's going on. And there's a practical reason. Aside from the spiritual terrorism that we talked about before, there's a very practical reason for setting right now. I think 2020 is year zero for the Cultural Revolution in America, right?
Yes.
This is year zero. In fact, if I ran Time magazine, not that I would want to, but like year zero would be a good title for the cover, right? This is year zero. That's what this is. And remember that when people get indoctrinated into this, the very first, if you think about your brain as like, there's different arenas, like you can think about different kinds of things. The very first neurons that are killed, the very first area of your brain that needs to be dark is the critical thought around the ideology. The first thing you need to do is be blind to the ideology itself, right? So you need to be arguing that your ignorance and your stupidity is some form of enlightenment. That's the number one goal. Then they can just start filling your mind with whatever crap they want. And so
they do that effectively. Can I?
Please. I know I'm on a rant,
They do that effectively by what we talked about earlier, and what there was a person in our chat who I would assume agrees with social justice ideology. His name was Peter. I don't know if he's still here. But Peter illustrated Kafka Trap right after we explained what it was. He did exactly what we said they do. Right after we said it, you didn't see it? He says the fact that you guys arguing against white fragility is an example of your white fragility.
Yes. Excellent example, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. They make it so that you can't question the ideology, like you said, and they do it so effectively. I was in a conversation on Twitter last night with some guy who I assume is very well-intentioned, who claims to be a Christian and is pushing this racist, evil belief system. And he said, he said, your post is your Twitter feed's full of racism. I was like, no, it's not. I don't believe in judging people and treating them differently on the basis of race. If you're going to make that accusation, show me which tweets you're talking about. And he couldn't. But he wanted me to give an example of what I was calling racist on the SJW side with this SJW preacher who I follow. Mm-hmm. And I did easily.
Sure, that's easy.
The tweet we were talking about, he said whiteness, or he said white people have normalized gaslighting or whatever. White culture has normalized. So that's racist. He's indicting an entire group of people based on nothing more than their race. That's racist. And you know what this guy said back to me? That's not racist. Racism is impossible against white people. Racism is prejudice plus power. Racism. They feel
he ran his
their
algorithm.
Head with,
I get it.
Yeah, they fill their head with this crap, and I used to believe it. I preached it. They fill their head with this crap to protect the ideology, because if you're to look at it on its face, it's objectively racist and sexist. It tells you to judge people on the basis of what race they are, treat them differently on the basis of race. That's disgusting. It tells you to look at people based on what sex they are, and to treat them, to have different rules of standards of treatment for people based on what sex they are, what sexuality they are. It is on its face a bigoted ideology. So how do you get people to push that? You tell them the definition of racism is now different.
Right.
It sounds absurd, but look at all the
arrows
people
for your quiver. Right.
Yeah. And so they protect the ideology from critical thought, and they don't encourage critical thought. And they have thousands of ways to end discussion or to end thought. And thank you, Peter, for illustrating one of the perfect ones they do, which is If you disagree with this, well, then you're racist. Well, I disagree with white fragility. Well, that's because you're white. You're displaying
Maybe
white
Peter was
fragility.
on our side, just being obvious about he was giving an example of
think
being a social justice
I don't
warrior.
think so.
No.
Yeah.